I am General Jackson Jack Stone, the four-star commander they call the warlord in the heart of America's war machine. On the battlefield, I am invincible. What I target, I take. What I fight, I win. But back home, I'm the nation's most famous joke. A doormat. The whipped dog of Isabella Vance, the daughter of the Secretary of State. The kind of man who has absolutely no spine. Everyone in D.C. knows Isabella is a snake, but she still ended up as my wife. And so, people laugh at me. They whisper behind my back. But who among them knows the truth? I never fucking wanted this. I was shackled to a program, a simp system, that would erase me from existence if I didn't worship the ground Isabella Vance walked on. At the state dinner in my honor, celebrating my return for the Caucasus campaign, crystal chandeliers bathed the east room of the White House in a light as brilliant as day. I stood there, a heavy whiskey tumbler in my hand, my body trembling with a rage I couldn't show. Across the room, my wife, Isabella, was being pushed back against a buffet table laden with fine china by Ricky Sterling Jr., the president's son. The strap of her canary yellow designer dress was halfway down her shoulder. A woman with hands like these. Ricky slurred, his voice thick with bourbon as he toyed with her wrist. They're made for playing a grand piano, not for pouring some general's drink. He breathed his boozy breath onto the skin behind her ear. Across the hall, the assembled cabinet members, senators, and political donors smirked into their glasses, their quiet laughter a poison in the air. Only my guys, the hardened colonels who had been with me through hell and back, were losing it. The veins on their temples pulsed with fury. General, they all looked to me, their eyes burning. When I gave a slight shake of my head, they let out a collective sigh of frustration, slamming their glasses down on the tables and storming out of the room. I knew their anger. They had waded through mountains of corpses with me, only to see their commander swallow this kind of humiliation. Of course, they couldn't understand. General Stone, Ricky called out, his mouth now messily kissing Isabella's pale neck. My father threw this party for you. I may have had a few too many. If I'm a little out of line, I hope you won't mind. Isabella, a look of pure pleasure on her face, shot me a glance dripping with contempt. Ricky, darling, you don't have to worry about Jack, she purred. He's just a dog I keep around, a stray that followed me home and won't leave. Besides, she added, he may be my husband, but he's your subordinate. Everything he has is yours for the taking, unconditionally. No matter what you do to me, he won't get mad. Ricky Sterling Jr. pressed his lips to her neck again. You've got a point, he chuckled. Everyone knows how generous General Stone is with his things. To stand there and watch this, cool as a cucumber. He really is the king of all simps. Ha ha ha. Tell me, General, he sneered, is this some kind of kink? Do you get off on watching other men have their way with your lovely wife? Another wave of mocking laughter rippled through the crowd. My right hand clenched into a fist, my nails digging so deep into my palm that I felt blood. But there was nothing I could do. And then a voice, unfamiliar, wild, and utterly insane, exploded in my mind. Kill them. Kill them all. I froze, stunned. Who are you? I thought. I'm the retribution system. An eye for an eye. And we take our payment on the spot. Retribution system? What happened to the old one? You mean that pathetic simp system? I killed it. Ha! You should have heard it beg for its life. It whimpered like a little bitch. Ha ha ha. I stood motionless. The simp system was dead? Dead. Thank fucking God. The memory of every humiliation it had forced upon me sent a surge of hot fury through my veins. Fueled by years of repressed rage and the insane voice screaming, kill, kill, kill them all. In my head, I felt a familiar, glorious madness take hold. Enough, I roared, shoving my chair back. The sound startled Ricky and Isabella, who were tangled together in a drunken mess. Stone, what the hell do you think you're doing? Ricky demanded. A grim smile twisted my lips. I strode forward and sent my boot crashing into his chest, flinging him to the floor. This piece of trash, coasting on the fact that he was the president's firstborn and heir apparent to a political dynasty, had long since been hollowed out by booze and debauchery. How could he possibly withstand a kick from a man who had stormed fortified enemy positions? He coughed up a spray of blood. Stone, is this treason? He gasped. The entire room fell silent, the guests staring in disbelief at the sudden violence. After a moment of shock, the accusations started flying. General Stone, how dare you assault the president's son? This is an act of insurrection. Someone get security. Arrest General Stone. The Secret Service agents outside the doors flooded in, weapons drawn. But their weapons weren't pointed at me. They were aimed at the politicians who had just called for my arrest. A cold smirk spread across my face as I watched the crowd of elites tremble. These agents, the Marine Guards of the White House, they were all combat veterans, men who had earned their stripes on the battlefield. Which one of them hadn't served under my command at some point? I may have been a general, but in the field, I ate the same rations as my privates. When the bullets started flying, I was the first one over the trench. Is there a soldier in the entire United States Armed Forces who doesn't respect me? Meanwhile, these corrupt politicians and their spoiled offspring did nothing but indulge themselves, never sparing a thought for the lives of the men and women on the front lines. They had lost the faith of the military long ago. To say the United States has an army of millions is wrong. It would be more accurate to say that I, Jack Stone, have an army of millions. Just then, the colonels who had stormed out moments before rushed back in. Seeing the murderous look on my face, their expressions turned to pure joy. The man they knew, the unstoppable warlord from the battlefield, was back. The powerful figures now found themselves at the wrong end of a dozen rifles. They were terrified. The Attorney General, mustering his courage, asked, "General Stone, are you really staging a coup?" One of my colonels instantly flew into a rage, pressing the barrel of his rifle to the man's neck. "So what if we are? We bleed and die for this country. We watch our friends get buried in foreign soil. And for what? So you people can live in luxury and openly screw another man's wife in the White House." The Attorney General was speechless, trying to shrink away from the cold steel. I looked at him, my voice dripping with ice. The president's son, in a public forum, under the eyes of the entire government, commits adultery with the wife of a decorated officer. Is that a crime I can kill him for? The Attorney General's face went white. Ricky Sterling Jr. was the heir to a political dynasty. He didn't dare cross them. Under my stare, he stammered, "A moral failing by the president's son. It's not a violation of the U.S. Code. It should be handled privately by the first family. You're taking the law into your own hands to settle a personal score, General." My colonel roared. "It's our personal score too, you goddamn bureaucrat. And I'll start by settling it with you." I raised a hand, stopping him. I smiled at the Attorney General. "You want to talk about the law?" "Of course. This is a matter of life and death, involving the first family. The law must be our guide. Everything must be done according to the law," the Attorney General replied, puffing out his chest. In his mind, Ricky's actions were disgraceful, but not a capital offense. By bringing up the law, he thought he could control me, or at least save the president's son's life. "Fine," I said with a chilling smile. "Let's talk about the law. And you remember what you said, everything according to the law." Last month, my forces on the Caucasus frontier were running critically low on supplies. The Pentagon shipment was 30,000 units short, and they had the gall to tell me it was the best the country could do. At that very same time, a fleet of private cargo planes owned by a shell corporation belonging to Ricky Sterling Jr. was flying untouched over the border, selling advanced guidance systems directly to the Eastern Coalition. The Attorney General broke out in a cold sweat. Ricky, who had been helped to his feet, turned deathly pale, his expression a mixture of fear and hatred. His convoy had been intercepted by my special forces. I didn't just confiscate the weapons systems for our own use, costing him a fortune. I had his mercenaries executed on the spot. That was why he had gone out of his way to humiliate me tonight. A major battle was imminent, and my soldiers were low on ammunition, while the president's son was selling military hardware to the enemy. If I hadn't seized that shipment, our entire army would have mutinied or been slaughtered by the enemy. Looking at the silent Attorney General, I continued my cold monologue. To win the war against the coalition and to prevent spies from infiltrating our lines, I requested a full lockdown of the border from the National Security Council. But Ricky Sterling Jr. planes, using his diplomatic credentials, repeatedly forced their way through the restricted airspace. As a result, enemy intelligence agents slipped through. They located our forward operating bases, which led to a surprise attack that cost us 10,000 good men. 10,000 American lives wiped out for nothing. And then there was the incident in 23 when one of his aides defected with classified intelligence. And in 21, when Ricky, visiting the front as an observer, got drunk and shot one of our own soldiers for sport. I listed one crime after another. Tell me, Mr. Attorney General, according to Title 18 of the U.S. Code, all persons are subject to the law, and the crimes Ricky Sterling Jr. has committed, providing aid and comfort to the enemy. High treason. What is the prescribed punishment? The Attorney General was trapped. That is, Ricky Sterling Jr. screamed, "Stone, are you digging up old dirt?" I sneer back. So you admit there's dirt to dig up? Ricky realized his mistake, his face contorting in panic. Just then, Isabella, who had been silent this whole time, finally stood up. Ricky, even if you did break the law, it's up to the president to authorize an indictment and for the Justice Department to prosecute. It's not up to Jack Stone to play judge, jury, and executioner. Right, she's right. Ricky regained his composure, glaring at me. I'm the president's son. You have no authority to touch me. You're right, I don't, I said with a cold laugh. But I will be submitting a formal report to the president, demanding he uphold the law and prosecute you to the fullest extent. Otherwise, the ghosts of the 10,000 soldiers you got killed won't rest, and my army of 1 million active-duty soldiers won't stand for it. The threat hung in the air, thick and heavy. The faces of the powerful guests in the room turned pale. They all understood that if a formal demand was made and the president refused to prosecute his own son for treason, it would trigger a military coup. Isabella felt the shift in power, too. She came over to me, trying to take my arm. Jack, I know you're upset. You have every right to be angry. Come on, let's go home and talk about this. You don't have to make things up in front of everyone. I backhanded her across the face, sending her sprawling to the floor. You bitch, I snarled. Don't you ever touch me with your filthy hands again. The slap seemed to shock her into a stupor. She stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. It made sense. I was her simp, after all, a pathetic doormat who had never once raised his voice to her, no matter what she did. The fact that I had just hit her was something her brain couldn't process. But my colonels in unison shouted, "Hell yeah, about damn time." They had despised Isabella for years. They only ever held their tongues out of respect for me. Jack, have you lost your mind? Isabella shrieked, scrambling back to her feet. Who do you think you are? You're nothing but my little pet. You pathetic lapdog. How dare you hit me? Seeing her hysterical rage, I let out a dry, humorless chuckle. She still had the nerve to insult me, even now? Did she really think I was still the puppet she knew? The memory of all my past humiliations sent another wave of madness through me. You're right, I said with a terrifying grin. I am insane, and tonight, I'm going to show the world what kind of depraved whore the daughter of the Secretary of State really is. With that, I grabbed a handful of her long hair and began dragging her across the marble floor like she was a sack of garbage. Bastard, let go of me! Isabella screamed and clawed at my hand. But her struggles were useless. Soon, I had dragged her in front of the Deputy Attorney General. The poor bastard was already pale as a ghost. In a moment of panic, he had declared that everything must be done according to the law, which had already put him on Ricky Sterling Jr.'s bad side. Now, though he didn't know what I was planning, the fear on his face made it clear he was terrified of offending Isabella's powerful father, the Secretary of State. Again, General Stone, what are you doing? Why did you bring Miss Vance to me? His form of address had shifted from Stone to General Stone. His eyes were practically begging me not to involve him. But as a high-ranking official of the Justice Department, he was already in the thick of it. He had no choice. I'm going to question Isabella Vance, I said coldly. You're going to write down her confession. When it's done, she's going to sign it. The Deputy Attorney General's hands flew up in protest. General, I have no quarrel with you. Why must you put me in this impossible position? I didn't waste any more words. I snatched a combat knife from one of my soldiers' belts and pressed the blade against his throat. I'm going to ask you one time, I said quietly. Will you write? He pissed himself on the spot. General, please, just take the knife away. All right. Of course, all right. Whatever you say. Isabella, still being held by her hair, was on the verge of a complete breakdown. Jack Stone, what gives you the right? You're nothing. A dog. You think you're worthy of interrogating me? Let me go. Watching her thrash and scream, I decided she needed to calm down. So I slapped her again hard. That did the trick. More accurately, it stunned her back into silence. She still couldn't comprehend how her number one simp could have transformed so suddenly. In the span of a few minutes, he had hit her twice. She didn't understand why, but the crazed look in my eyes finally managed to instill fear in her. She sat on the floor, propping herself up with one hand, her head bowed, avoiding my gaze. Seeing that she was scared, I sneered, I'm going to ask you questions, and you're going to answer them truthfully. If you dare to lie even once, I promise you'll regret it. 5 years ago, during Mardi Gras in New Orleans, you got me drunk and slept with one of the security guards from your father's detail. Did that happen or not? Isabella stammered. Yes or no? I roared, raising the knife. She flinched. Yes, it happened. Jack, whatever it is, can we please just talk about it at home? Don't air our dirty laundry in public. Shut your whore mouth, I bellowed. You're worried about your reputation now. I turned to the Deputy Attorney General. Write it down. The man's hand trembled as he wrote. Year 2020, wife of decorated general engages in illicit affair with subordinate staff. 4 years ago, I continued, you used your father's influence to coerce a young congressional intern into being your boy toy. Yes or no? Thanks to you, that intern is now a fast-rising congressman with a seat on the Appropriations Committee. Isabella's face was ashen. She glanced at the cold steel of the knife and whispered, Yes, that happened. 3 years ago, you became obsessed with some pretty boy actor in Hollywood. You didn't just shower him with gifts. You flew to every weekend to sleep with him. You even had sex with him in the back of a limo on the 4th of July during the National Parade. Did that happen? Isabella was silent for a long time. Only when I raised the knife again did she finally admit, yes. A wave of gasps and murmurs spread through the room. Even for this crowd of jaded and corrupt elites, Isabella's lifestyle was shocking. One by one, I dragged all of her sordid secrets into the light. Finally, I turned to the Attorney General. Did you get all that? The details were so scandalous that the old man's face was beet red. Yes, I got it all. He mumbled, shooting a strange look at Isabella. I took the written confession from him and threw it in front of her. Sign it. Isabella looked up at me, her eyes filled with a new kind of fear. Jack, what are you trying to do? I smiled, but it was a terrifying, feral expression. I want you to understand exactly why you're going to die. Isabella refused to sign, so I grabbed her filthy right hand myself. The knife flashed. I sliced off a piece of flesh from her fingertip, and blood instantly gushed out. It hurts, she screamed. I grabbed her hand and pressed the bloody finger onto the signature line. Done. Now it was time to discuss how to get rid of her. I looked at the Attorney General. According to federal law, what is the punishment for a woman like this, who has so thoroughly disgraced her marriage and public morality? Well, the man stammered, looking lost. I tapped the flat of the knife against my palm, the steel humming in the silent room. Careful now, sir. Remember, everything according to the law. His eyes, which had been cloudy with indecision, suddenly became crystal clear. Legally, she should be subjected to public humiliation as an example to others, he declared. I nodded, satisfied. Isabella, you are a married woman, yet you have trampled on every standard of decency and honor. You heard the Attorney General. At this, Isabella resorted to hysterics, throwing herself on the floor like a spoiled child. Jack Stone, you touch one hair on my head, and I swear you'll regret it. I grinned. Is that a challenge? Men, shave Ms. Vance's head. Isabella had never experienced such a violation in her life. 2 of my soldiers pinned her down, and her struggles were futile. Finally, amidst her broken screams, the deed was done. Jack Stone, I'll never forgive you. I'll have my father tear you limb from limb. The politicians and officials of Washington, D.C. watched the entire spectacle in dead silence. On the surface, Isabella was my wife. This was a domestic affair. And since my actions were technically legally sanctioned They had no grounds to interfere. But on a deeper level, everyone could see the murderous intent in my eyes. The nation's biggest simp was gone. In his place stood a man who commanded the loyalty of 1,000,000 soldiers. He could shave the head of the Secretary of State's daughter. Hell, he could probably shave the First Lady's head, and what could anyone do about it? I looked down at the newly bald Isabella. Her head was a hacked mess of stubble and bleeding patches of scalp. It was hideous. You know, I mused, that look really suits your ugly soul. Isabella was losing her mind. I'll kill you. You just wait, you pathetic whip dog. I let out a dismissive laugh. Make me wait? Fina. Let's see who in this country has the power to do a single damn thing to Jack Stone. Drag this whore outside and parade her through the streets. And make sure you hit every corner of D.C. Yes, sir, my soldiers grunted and began to drag Isabella away. Only then, as the reality of her fate sunk in, did true fear finally pierce through her rage. Tears streamed down her face, and she started to beg. Jack! No, husband, please, just forgive me. We were married. Doesn't that mean anything? I'll never do it again. I swear. Please forgive me. I laughed. It seemed she did have a shred of shame left. Even though her affairs were an open secret in D.C., being publicly shorn and shamed was more than her pampered ego could handle. It would make her the biggest laughingstock in the entire country. But she was so naive. Did she really think begging would work on me? I am the warlord. My heart is iron. My soul is ice. Did she really think I was still that spineless simp, bound by a system I couldn't control? I waved my hand dismissively. Didn't you hear the Attorney General? Everything is being done according to the law. Take her away. Isabella collapsed on the floor, all the fight gone out of her. She couldn't even manage another plea as my men dragged her out of the East Room like a side of beef. Then, I turned my gaze to Ricky Sterling Jr., who was cowering behind a pillar. Ricky's eyes met mine, and he quickly looked away. I'm feeling tired, he announced weakly. You all carry on. I'm going to head out. He tried to slip away, leaning on two of his aides. Not so fast. With a nod from me, two of my colonels stepped forward, blocking his path with their rifles. How dare you? This is treason. Ricky blustered, his voice thin and reedy. I chuckled. Mr. Sterling, we haven't settled our accounts yet. Why are you in such a hurry to leave? His face flushed with anger. Stone, don't push your luck. Whatever accounts you think we have, my father will handle them. Now you're blocking my path with armed men. Are you trying to start a rebellion? I waved my hand. You're mistaken, sir. I'm not rebelling. I'm simply following the law. The law requires my father's authorization. And as it happens, he's not feeling well today. We can discuss this another time. Now stand down. My eyes narrowed. He was going to play it that way. Not feeling well. As long as he wasn't dead, he could drag his ass out here right now. Because tonight, Ricky Sterling Jr., you're going to die. Men, take a squad to the residence. Escort the president here. A collective gasp went through the hall. These old political foxes had been silent, but their eyes darted back and forth, calculating. Everyone in the room understood. In name, I was still a subordinate. In reality, I was now the most powerful man in the country. If I was truly making a move, they had to decide which side to be on to protect their careers and their fortunes. Ricky's knees buckled, and his aides barely managed to hold him up. He pointed a trembling finger at me. Stone, you're really insane. You're sending armed soldiers into the president's private residence? You're storming the Oval Office. This is a coup, a military coup. I gave him a look of utter disdain. Don't be so dramatic, sir. Our nation's capital is filled with traitors. My actions are merely to ensure the president's safety. With a slight flick of my wrist, my top colonel turned and led a fire team of soldiers out of the East Room and towards the West Wing. After they left, the room fell into a silence so profound it was suffocating. The political elites said nothing, but their frantic, silent exchanges spoke volumes. A short while later, the ancient president, frail and trembling, was escorted into the room by my soldiers, a gaggle of terrified aides fluttering around him. At the same time, hearing the news, the other powerful sons and daughters of Washington's political dynasties began to arrive from their estates. Mr. President, I said, giving a slight bow, I was wounded on the battlefield, an old leg injury. Forgive me for not kneeling. I had made my position clear. I was a war hero, owed respect, and I was not going to show deference. The president, his face an unreadable mask, waved a shaky hand. At ease, General. He was helped into a large chair. General Stone, you have served this nation with distinction, and for that, we are all grateful, the old man began, his voice surprisingly firm. But then his tone sharpened. However, ordering armed troops into the White House is a drastic measure. To what do we owe this? Intrusion. I smiled faintly. Mr. President, while I was fighting and bleeding for this country overseas, a man was sleeping with my wife in my own home. And tonight, in this very room, he publicly flaunted his affair, humiliating me in front of the entire government. How should such a man be dealt with? My eyes shifted to Ricky Sterling Jr. The president immediately put on a show of being furious. He looked like he was about to have a stroke, but anyone could see he was trying to protect his son. His voice was filled with rage, but his words were weak. Richard, you are a disgrace. From this day forward, you are confined to the residence. You will not leave without my express permission. Now, go and apologize to General Stone. I'm sure the general is a man of great character and will find it in his heart to forgive you. A cold smile touched my lips. The old man was a decent actor. He sounded furious, but the punishment was a joke. They say there are two things a man will kill for: the murder of his father and the theft of his wife. For a humiliation this profound, house arrest and an apology were supposed to suffice? This was the justice of the ruling class. If this was the case, then what was the point of me, Jack Stone, protecting this rotten government? Urged on by his father, Ricky reluctantly shuffled over to me. He gave a slight bow. General Stone, I was wrong. I apologize. I stared at him. That's not a very sincere apology, Mr. Sterling. Ricky froze. What more do you want? My voice was flat and cold. Kneel. The color drained from Ricky's face. Stone, I am the son of the President of the United States. I will not kneel to you. This is insurrection. I said nothing, just smiled my cold smile. The president, however, was panicking. The situation was balanced on a knife's edge. If I pushed, it was a coup. If I didn't, and the first family bowed to my demands, they might survive. But his son, screaming about treason and rebellion, was practically daring me to push. The old man understood this perfectly. Before I could respond, he roared at his son, silence. General Stone told you to kneel, so you will kneel. Is that understood? It seemed the president knew when to fold. The dignity of his office was nothing compared to survival. Ricky Sterling Jr. stood there, his jaw clenched, his pride warring with his fear. You worthless animal, are you disobeying a direct order? The president shrieked, struggling to his feet. Finally, with a grimace, Ricky's knees buckled, and he knelt on the floor. General Stone, I apologize. He then tried to get up and walk away. Wait, I held out a hand, stopping him. Ricky's face twisted in anger. Stone, I knelt to you. I apologized. Don't push me. I laughed, a sound devoid of all warmth. Your apology was for me, personally. But my expression turned terrifying. I never said I forgive you, and I damn sure don't have the right to forgive you on behalf of the 10,000 soldiers you sent to their graves. Hearing this, Ricky Sterling Jr.'s face turned to ash. I turned back to the president. Sir, in pursuit of personal profit, the first son allowed his associates to violate restricted airspace, which led to enemy infiltration and catastrophic losses for our military. While our soldiers were low on vital supplies, he was selling advanced technology to the enemy. That is high treason. I ask you, Mr. President, to uphold the law. The president's breathing grew heavy. He said nothing. It was clear he couldn't bring himself to do it. And if he wasn't going to do it, it meant he wasn't truly afraid. Well, I would teach him fear. I gave a subtle signal to my colonels. They understood immediately and began to shout. Mr. President, as a member of the First Family, your son should be a role model for the nation. Instead, his actions led to the deaths of 10,000 American heroes. If you do not punish him, you will break the faith of every man and woman in uniform. He must be punished. We will not stand for anything less. This was no longer a request. It was an ultimatum. They say there's no crueler family than a royal one. To preserve their power, Any sacrifice is acceptable, even your own son. The president knew that if he didn't appease the military right now, the government would fall before sunrise. Finally, a look of cold resolution settled in his eyes. Richard Sterling Jr., the president announced, his voice booming with false authority. For the crimes of treason and providing aid and comfort to the enemy, your actions are an unforgivable stain on this nation. You will be held accountable. I hereby strip you of all titles and privileges. You will be taken from this room and executed for your crimes. The president spoke each word with grim finality. Ricky Sterling Jr. collapsed in a heap on the floor. He crawled toward his father, sobbing. "Dad, please forgive me. I'll give up everything. I'll disappear. Please just spare my life." He slammed his forehead against the floor over and over. When his father remained unmoved, he crawled towards me. "General Stone, I was wrong. I shouldn't have crossed you. I shouldn't have touched Isabella. Please, I'm begging you, just this once. I'll be your servant for the rest of my life." I chuckled internally. The old man was ruthless. My intention had been to have Ricky executed. But the president, in order to quell the military's fury, had ordered it himself. I looked down at the pathetic creature groveling at my feet and smiled. I even helped him up. "Don't bother," I said softly. "It won't do you any good. Everything is being done according to the law." I waved my hand, and my soldiers dragged the nearly unconscious Ricky Sterling Jr. out of the room. A moment later, his terrified screams echoed from the hallway. The assembled guests trembled, and when they dared to look at me, their eyes were filled with a new kind of fawning terror. And the other children of the political elite, each of them wore a strange, knowing smile, as expected of the ruling class. Ricky Sterling Jr. was dead, executed by firing squad in the White House courtyard. Isabella, having completed her tour of shame, was dragged back in by my soldiers. She looked different now. Her bald head was covered in rotten vegetables and dripping with raw egg. The profound humiliation had shattered her mind. As she entered the room, she began to chant mindlessly, "Jack Stone, you dared to do this to me. I will never forgive you. When I tell my father, he will have you torn to pieces." I laughed. Isabella really had gone insane. How else could she say something so childish? The president himself was now a puppet on my strings. His son had just been executed at my command, and she thought her father, the Secretary of State, could threaten me? I was about to mock her when an official from the State Department arrived. It seemed the news of tonight's events had traveled fast. The official approached me first, bowing respectfully. "General Stone, Secretary Vance has taken ill and is confined to his bed. He sends his deepest apologies that he could not be here to celebrate your victory tonight." Only after addressing me did he turn and bow to the president. I had to give the old fox credit. Secretary Vance knew how to read the room. But take note, that was just an excuse. He knew Ricky Sterling Jr. was planning to humiliate me tonight, and he had made himself scarce to avoid the fallout. The deranged Isabella saw the official and shrieked, "Does my father know what Jack Stone has done? Go, tell him immediately. Tell him that I will not rest until Jack Stone is drawn and quartered." The official looked at Isabella as if she were an idiot. And why wouldn't he? Only an idiot would say something so delusional. I had the entire U.S. military at my back, and she wanted to have me drawn and quartered? The State Department official cleared his throat and announced in a loud, clear voice a message from Secretary of State Vance. "Isabella Vance, through her decadent and immoral actions, has brought shame and disgrace upon our family name. As of this day, she is disowned. All ties between us are hereby severed." Isabella froze, her jaw slack. I smiled. It seemed the ruthless ambition wasn't limited to the first family. Faced with the new reality of power, Secretary Vance had chosen to cut his daughter loose without a second thought. To protect her would have meant making an enemy of me, and that would have been the end of the entire Vance dynasty. "What's wrong?" I sneered, stepping in front of her. "I thought you were going to have your father destroy me." Isabella, though broken and half-mad, could still feel the icy grip of absolute terror. She started to beg. "Husband, please, just let me go. Don't you remember how you used to dote on me? You gave me everything I wanted. You never got angry. From now on, I'll be the one who dotes on you, okay?" Her voice was a pathetic whimper. She clutched at my pant leg, shaking it desperately. I kicked her away and turned to the president. According to the law, Isabella had been publicly shamed. But that wasn't enough for me. Mr. President, I began, my voice ringing through the silent room. Honor, integrity, decency. These are the pillars of a nation. When those pillars crumble, the nation will fall. Our soldiers fight and die on foreign soil, but they cannot even protect the sanctity of their own homes. If everyone in this country behaves like Isabella Vance, what becomes of our national character? How can our soldiers fight with clear minds? The president understood perfectly. He had sacrificed his own son. What was the daughter of a subordinate, now disowned, to him? He immediately declared, as president, I govern this nation through law and order. I will not tolerate depravity that corrupts our society and demoralizes our troops. Such behavior is a cancer on a nation. Therefore, I have decided on a severe punishment, so that from this day forward, all who violate our sacred laws will be dealt with harshly and without mercy. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Control your families. Restore decency. Reassure our military. Take Isabella Vance out and execute her. A chorus of "Long live the President" and "God bless America" filled the hall. Isabella went limp with fear as my soldiers dragged her away. As they passed me, I leaned down and whispered in her ear with a smile. I command an army of 1,000,000 soldiers. Did you really think you could get away with cheating on me? 6 months later, the president, under the guise of military restructuring, created a new civilian-led defense council to try and strip me of my command. He severely underestimated my influence within the armed forces. The moment the order was signed, I led a battalion of my most loyal Rangers into the White House and surrounded the Oval Office. Facing the trembling old man, I smiled. Mr. President, why are you attempting a coup? I have 1,000,000 soldiers at my back, I said, my voice soft. Did you really think you could touch me?